everybody. I am very, very happy and honored to introduce our next speaker, Lee Hall. Lee Hall and I have been colleagues and friends in the animal rights movement, in the vegan movement, in the eco-feminist movement for about 20 or more years. And Lee is the author of several vegan cookbooks and books about animal rights. And she is a marvelous speaker. Every year we're together at the Vegetarian Summerfest at the University of Pittsburgh-Johnstown campus. And Lee is with us today to talk to you about, I bet, going vegan and animal rights. So without further ado, it's my great privilege to introduce my wonderful friend and colleague, Lee Hall.
That's an honor. Thank you, Karen. Well, also, if you have any follow-up questions about the talk today, or you'd like to continue the conversation later, you can find me at Twitter, at Vegan Place. All one word, Vegan Place. And of course, there is the Facebook group for the Veggie Pride Parade. So we can all talk together there. But right now, I need to mention that the classic term for disappointment is raining on one's parade. And we were very close to seeing rain on our parade today. We just scraped by, really, a little mist. But in the gardens throughout the city, the sunflowers are thirsty and they're drinking it up. So they're happy, and of course sunflowers are the symbol for the international vegan movement. So we're happy with them. But for those of you, and can everyone hear me? For those of you who had the courage and the good heart to show up today and celebrate yourselves as vegans or support your friends or think about becoming vegan, I have a little ditty for you, just for you for coming. So here we go. We're vegan in the rain, just vegan in the rain. What a glorious feeling the sunflowers gain. Since 1944, we've shown up to do more than sit like imposters on top of the food chain. In nature we trust, get soaked if we must, 'cause we love to be with vegans in the rain. All together that last line, because we love to be with vegans in the rain. Thank you. So you noticed that the year 1944 was in that song, and this is a very tiny capsule of the history and the present and the future of who we are and what we're doing. And in 1944, the Vegan Society was founded. Significant year. This year is 2014, so it's exactly 70 years ago. We are in the platinum anniversary year of veganism. And another thing that was going on in 1944, it was basically the brink of what is called factory farming. Animals being stuffed into indoor spaces and processed in a high-volume manner, factory farming. And the beginning of this, as I'm sure Karen Davis knows, the beginning of this was chickens being stuffed into disused army sheds after World War II. So it started with the chickens. And the founders in 1944 of the Vegan Society were conscientious objectors to war, but also obviously to a greater war, a broader war. So not only the war that we have thought for so many generations is inevitable, They said, no, war between human beings is not inevitable, it's not normal, and we're not going to put up with it, nor is the constant, continuous oppression of other than human beings normal either. They did both at the same time. Now, Ryn Berry, and I'm dedicating this talk to Ryn Berry because Ryn Berry would talk about history. So I need to say that Ryn Berry would come up and stop me right now and say, there are so many people who essentially lived as vegans before the Europeans came and used the word vegan in 1944. And then Ryn would say that the Lenape tribe, a subsidiary of the Algonquin tribe, people who lived here on this land, were essentially vegans. And Ryn would say that the staple food for the Lenape tribe was a porridge made of acorns. Who knew that but Ryn? I mean, Ryn would really draw you into history. And then you would find out that, you know when everybody tells you, oh, you think you have to be vegan, but the Native Americans, they hunted. So, and they were respectful, so it's okay. You don't need to be vegan. The Native Americans were. But then, if you actually go back into history, you find out that that's not the case. Except for the Apache tribe, the Native Americans lived essentially directly from plants. And it was when the settlers came and began to frighten people and disrupt their lives and erase them and move them to Oklahoma, then things changed for the Native Americans. I wouldn't have found that out except that Ryn inspired me to find it out. The settlers who came here from Europe, there were some sensitive people among them, and they arose in the year 1850, and they started the first North American Vegetarian Society, and they did this right after the very first one was started in England in 1947, the very first Vegetarian Society, or at least the first people to put the word out there, vegetarian. And in England, the people who formed a vegetarian society were, their names you'll know. George Bernard Shaw was one of them. Tolstoy, the Russian novelist, was a contemporary at that time. Gandhi would become a secretary of an offshoot of the Vegetarian Society. It was called the London Vegan Club. And you might have heard of Anna Kingsford, a medical doctor, a feminist, who went to France to be able to be allowed to get into medical school. And Anna Kingsford graduated from medical school with a medical degree, doing a really revolutionary thing, not vivisecting on any animals the entire time in medical school. Truly revolutionary person. Prison reformer Henry Salt, who came up basically with a written theory of animal rights, explaining that it wasn't simply a matter of treatment, how we treated them, how abusive it was. That wasn't the point. It was that we were turning them into property and that we had begun oppressing them at all, that they have rights as humans do. So that was Henry Salt, a prison reformer. And the co-founder of the Methodist Church, John Wesley, was a vegetarian. And what did all these folks have in common? They cited human moral advancement as the reason that they became vegetarians and started the vegetarian movement. So it was a movement of ethics, not diet only. And they drew from long historical threads. The Buddhists, the Sufi mystics, the Pythagoreans, the Christian ascetic monks, the Jains. They drew from many, many generations of history of people who felt that it was wrong to kill another being if you don't have to, and indeed it is wrong to oppress others. If one doesn't have to, why would we do this? So by the time 1944 came along and the vegan society was formed, you see it was just an affirmation of something that we as humans have a long, long history of wanting, of aspiring to. And that's becoming a peaceful member of the bio community. And when they used the name vegan, they took the beginning letters and the ending letters from the word vegetarian, because it was the alpha and the omega of what vegetarian had always been. What they said they were doing was taking vegetarianism to its logical conclusion. So being a vegan is the logical conclusion of vegetarianism. That is our little capsule of history, and now I'll give you a very brief capsule of the present and the future. In school, we're often told how to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, we're talking about a nation, we're talking about pledging allegiance to a certain group of people within an arbitrary border, and we're saying we belong to them, and that others outside that border are others. And the vegan Pledge of Allegiance is something different. It is something that is an evolution within us. It is a pledge. To become vegan is a pledge of allegiance to the whole bio community. It is the idea that human beings have no right to exploit other beings for our own ends. So you see, this is what animal rights is really about. It's not so much about bestowing some privileges on various other beings. It's about what right we do not have. And that's the right, we have no right. Where would it come from? To be mean-spirited to others who can feel that, who are conscious of how we treat them. So veganism is interconnected with the struggles against environmental racism, against injustice in health and where people live, and inequality of suffering various environmental hazards. Veganism is part of the struggle against that and for human health and for the health of farm workers. And veganism, the direct eating, direct nourishment from plants, relies on practices that can be compatible with decency to the earth, with a decent ecological framework. I'll give you an example. When summer comes and a dairy cow is lactating and the owner is taking the milk, that dairy cow is drinking 4 times the amount of fluids that the dairy cow is producing. Now that doesn't make any common sense, that we're using up that much water so that the dairy cow can produce such a small relative amount of liquid. And all the time, of course, their babies are being taken away from them as this happens. They don't just give milk. They are lactating because they are pregnant. They may be pregnant about 3 times in their life until they're worn out and sold as meat. So they too are part of the flesh industry. And they are pregnant for 9 months, just as we are. And they miss their babies. And they do cry. I've talked with Harold Brown, a former dairy farmer who is now a vegan organic farm proponent, who says, yes, indeed, they do cry. How does it make any common sense that we feed farm animals 7 times the amount of grain we eat directly? How does that make sense? More than 7 billion people now live on Earth. But it's not just about our own footprint. We're outnumbered many times over by the animals we bring into existence to consume. In this country, we are outnumbered 5 to 1, and that's just by land animals that we're bringing into existence that we don't need to. How does that make any common sense? because it's a large centralized system, it's a very fossil heavy system. It's a carbon emitting system, very heavy. The ruminant animals are also emitting methane, which has a global warming potential of more than 20 times over, sometimes up to 30 times over that of carbon dioxide. And all ruminant animals give off methane. It doesn't matter if it's a factory farm or a free-range farm. All the animals are giving off methane. No matter how animals are raised, there is runoff, there is manure, there is pollution going into waterways, there is ammonia coming up into the air and causing acid rain. There are dead zones in the ocean because of pollution that's coming through the streams and into the ocean. Animal agribusiness is responsible for more greenhouse gases than all forms of transportation combined. That feels overwhelming, but don't let it, because we're here empowering ourselves. The places of power are our gardens and our kitchens. We have the power to turn this around. One person who gets total nutrition from plants directly, it's as though you're driving 8,000 miles less per year. One person who becomes vegan, it's the equivalent of every year driving 8,000 miles less in your car. So that's how powerful we are, and we do it through community agriculture, community-supported agriculture. We get involved, we learn how to can foods, put them in jars so that we can eat with the seasons and save our foods, or we may be learning urban gardening. We may be going into the schools and getting vegan food on the menu. And I don't like to say vegan options. Get us vegan options. Get us vegan offerings. Vegan shouldn't be an option. We need an evolution to a vegan culture. It's no longer optional. Imagine how much more efficient land use would be if we feed ourselves. Remember, 7 times the amount of grain is going to feed instead of food. Think about the land use difference. Think of how wilderness could be reclaimed if we didn't waste that land on a kind of agribusiness that we don't need. Think about the foxes and the wolves and the coyotes who wouldn't be killed by wildlife services for those free-range ranchers who are insisting that those wolves and those coyotes and those foxes be moved out of the way. There is no humane free-range farming. I saw a truck behind us. It's not the cinnamon snail. It's a nice little free local farming place, supposedly, with a happy little pig smiling, drinking away in a little water trough. That's the myth. It doesn't exist. So, taking vegetarian to its logical conclusion is the way to become an environmentalist today. It is the true way to pledge allegiance to this precious biosphere that we have, the future of life on Earth. I'm very pleased that I made that pledge 30 years ago, and I thank all of you who have also made that pledge, and I also want to welcome anyone here who is thinking about it today to please join us in making that pledge of allegiance to our Earth, to the other conscious beings on this Earth. And I also want to thank Pamela Rice and the presenters today and all the volunteers who have worked so hard, and to all of you who are listening and who are here today. Deep respect and gratitude to Rin Berry, to whom I dedicate this talk.